it's Mona here at Craft Klatch. Today is Friday, that means it's another Coaster Friday. I don't have a project for you today. Today I'm going to go over the top 5 reasons your resin coasters are not curing. It seems like I've had more questions lately about people having their coasters not cure. So I will try to answer the question as best as I can, and there's about 5 reasons that I can think of that typically your resin coaster might not be curing. I'm going to go over the 5 reasons that that's most likely happening. First, I want to say that I'm going to be talking about epoxy resin. There's polyester resins and other resins. I have not worked with a polyester resin very often, so I'm not even going to comment on that. I'm simply talking about the epoxy resins. And even just the epoxy resins, there are so many different brands and kinds, and I use the ones that are a 1-to-1 mix ratio, but there are some that are like a 2-to-1 mix ratio. So you just need to, most importantly, read the directions that came with your resin. It's going to tell you how to mix. It's going to tell you any safety precautions. It's going to give you the ideal temperatures to be working with it, and the cure time, because even though it's hard after 12 hours, the resins that I use are not fully cured until 72 hours. So even though it's hard, it doesn't mean it's finished. Read the directions. That's the very most important thing. So let's get to the top 5 reasons. The number 1 reason, you didn't measure properly. So again, read the directions of your resin. It's going to tell you if it's a 2-to-1 or if it's a 1-to-1. You can measure it by weighing. I usually just use cups to measure, and I just really make sure I'm right there. I don't eyeball it and kind of make sure it's okay. I make sure that I'm like right on the money. If you haven't worked with resin, your package will typically come with 2 bottles. You'll have a resin and a hardener, and they have to mix together, have a chemical reaction, and that's how it hardens. So if you have too much of the hardener or too much of the resin, it's not going to have just the right chemical reaction, and things aren't going to go right. The second reason is you didn't mix properly. So let's say you measured everything perfectly, put them all together, and you mixed it, poured it into your mold, and it didn't cure. Again, follow the directions on the resin that you have purchased. All the resins I've worked with have been the same in that you pour it all into 1 cup, and then you mix it for a certain amount of time. Some resins are for 3 minutes, some are for 4 minutes, some are for 5 minutes. Whatever the directions say on your resin, mix it for that amount of time. For me, this is the worst part of working with resin, is because I get tired of mixing. And then you're supposed to pour it into a second cup and mix for another 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever your resin says, and take a look at it while you're doing it. Scrape the sides, scrape your stir stick into there and stuff, and mix, mix, mix. You don't want to see any swirls going through your resin. If you have any kind of swirls going through your resin, that means it's not properly mixed. It should all be one uniform color. So if you skimp on that, there's a good chance everything didn't get mixed properly, and that's why you might have soft spots. Maybe it didn't cure properly at all. So mix, 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 mix according to the directions. The third reason is it's too cold, and that's what I often have a problem with. My craft room is in the basement, and I'm up in Illinois, and it gets very, very cold. And even though the house is heated, the basement's heated, it still gets cold, and the resin doesn't like it. I mean, I've had resin kind of almost solidify just because it was that cold. So you want to make sure you warm up your resin. There's a couple different techniques I've seen, and I have put the resin in the microwave. Before mixing it, the resin portion in the microwave for about 5 seconds just to warm it up. And I don't know that you want to use your food microwave. I have also done where you put it in a water bath to warm up the resin, and that's great. But then you have to be careful because water and resin don't mix. So you need to just be careful that you don't get any of the water into your resin. And the third way is, like if you have a little heater, like a little space heater or something, you can put it in front of that for a while. You just don't want it to get too hot. If you get it too hot, it's going to cure too quickly, and you're going to have a hard time working with it. But if it's too cold, it just is not going to cure properly either. Again, that information will be in the directions that came with your resin, and it will say what temperatures you need to be between. Just like paint. You shouldn't paint under a certain temperature because it won't dry properly. The fourth reason is it's too humid, too much water in the air, and your resin won't cure properly. So I have, being in the basement, it can get humid, so I do have a dehumidifier in my craft room, and that keeps the humidity level at a decent level. But let's say you live in Florida or someplace very humid, or maybe it's just been incredibly rainy. You just need to be aware of that when you're working with the resin, or it will not cure properly. The fifth reason is maybe you mixed something into it that didn't allow it to cure properly. There are a lot of different ways that you can color resin, so I'm not going to get into all of those. However, like if you use a pigment powder, it's a pretty safe bet. If you use pigment made for resin, you're pretty safe. But even sometimes with that, there's a limit to how much you can do because it's going to affect the overall cure. And like you can put acrylic paint in it, but acrylic paint is basically water-based. And if you put too much of that in, it is also going to affect how your resin cures. And if you have too much of it in, maybe it won't cure properly at all, or it may end up still being bendy after the fact. So those are the top 5 reasons your resin might not be curing properly. And I hope it helps. Again, the most important thing is read the directions on your resin. And if you think of any other reasons why your resin's not curing, be sure to leave it in the comments below. I will definitely see you next time. Remember, life is too short not to shimmer, so grab your glue gun and your glitter. Stay safe. Bye, guys.